The Millrose Games Wanamaker Mile is stacked. It features the headline showdown of the 1500 meter world champion Josh Kerr facing the 4th fastest miler of all time and 2-time Wanamaker Mile champion Yared Nuguse. Also in this race are Hobbs Kessler, Neil Gully and Azzedine Habs. In this video, we are going to speculate as to who wins the Wanamaker Mile and consider the best route to victory for both Kerr and Nuguse. Now, the Wanamaker Mile is an event that Nuguse has been champion in for the last 2 years, and he also holds the meeting record, standing at a 3:47.38, which is also the American indoor mile record. His PB is a second quicker than Kerr's indoor mile PB, which stands at 3:48.87. And in a mile race, 1.5 seconds is a lot of time. Nuguse is also an Olympic bronze medalist in one of the greatest and fastest 1500 meter races ever run, where he ran a 3:27.8 in a razor close finish. He also has recent victories over Kerr in the 2024 Zurich Diamond League, but Josh Kerr is certainly no stranger to the indoor scene however, as he is the indoor 2-mile world record holder after he destroyed Mo Farah's previous mark of 8:03.4 to run in 8 minutes 00.67 seconds in last year's Millrose Games. He also beat Yared Nuguse in front of a home crowd in the 2024 Glasgow World Indoor Champs in the 3000 metres, after a monstrous kick over Ethiopia's Salomon Barega in the last lap. And whilst Nuguse was able to net himself a bronze medal in Paris, he was of course edged out by a 100th of a second by none other than Kerr, who won silver. Kerr also has recent victories over Nuguse in the 2024 Bowerman Mile, which he won, and of course the 2023 World Champs, which he also won. Kerr has been stellar since winning the World Champs in 2023, and has promised a hard and fast race with Nuguse. But who's going to win this showdown? Now ultimately there are many unknowns going into this race, as we do not know how well their preparation has gone and to what extent they are hoping to be fit for this part of the season. However, given that as Grand Slam races they have 4 important meets in the early to mid part of the season with $100,000 on the line for each meet, you'd expect them to come in pretty sharp for this race. They are both serious competitors and have spoken publicly on wanting to beat the other, as well as sharing their thoughts on how they will fare against each other in the race. What makes this exciting is that it's not a race where you can give a confident prediction like you can with some of the other meets out there. Both athletes are phenomenal in ability, versatile and closely matched, but we can speculate on some things. Let's start off by looking at the typical running tactics of both athletes. Kerr is best known for having a strong finish in big races, which is notably what won him his real claim to stardom. In most races, he takes a pretty consistent race plan, preferring to draft off the front runner but always remaining close within striking distance. Compared to a kicker like Cole Hocker, who tends to linger in the middle of the pack before making his move, Kerr prefers to breathe right down the neck of his front runner during the race. He says himself that he normally starts to press around 600 metres out, which in the case of the Prefontaine Classic led him to overtake and beat Ingebrigtsen with about 1.5 laps left in the race. And if we look at his 2-mile world record race last year, we see him letting Grant Fisher do a brunt of the front running before pressing and outkicking him with about 400 to go. In other races, he may kick a little later, but he starts to really close down his opponents before the last lap of a 200 meter track. By contrast, Nuguse tends to switch between a strength-based front-running style like we saw in the US Olympic trials, and trying to sit and kick off his opponents like we see in most high-level championship races. Looking at his previous victory in the 2023 Millrose Games, he displayed his sit-and-kick approach to the race, sitting behind his teammates Ollie Hoare and Mario Garcia Romo, who are closely tracking the pacer. Once the pacer dropped out with 600 metres to go, Nuguse began to make his move and overtook them with just over 400 metres before dropping them with an early and strong kick, quite similar to Kerr in fact. In his 2024 victory however, he took a much more aggressive approach to the race, trying to front-run an indoor mile record right from the beginning. He did fade in the race after running the first half of the mile 2 seconds below world record pace, but still achieved a victory whilst falling short of the world record. The fact that the Wanamaker Mile has a pacer will help him maintain an aggressive speed if he does indeed decide to front run, though the exact time the pacer will run remains to be seen. Now what is quite interesting is that Yared spoke in his interview with Citius Mag about how he wants to avoid aiming for a specific time as it puts unnecessary pressure on the race. Now this would technically imply that a more tactical affair is in order, and something I would be a little unsure about is how Kerr would react if an easier pace was requested and Nuguse decided he won't act as a front runner for Kerr. Because on the one hand, Kerr definitely prefers sitting and kicking on someone, but he also seems interested in chasing a solid time for the mile. Nonetheless, I do think the competitive ego will take over for both athletes, and they will aim for a fast time. Whether they aim for the meeting record is another question, and I think they'll more likely feel that out on the race day itself. I do still think Nuguse will take the lead in the race with Kerr tracking him closely, unless of course we have a similar situation to the 2023 games where his fellow on-running teammates might be able to help him out by taking out the pace fast from the beginning, allowing him to track behind them. But with all this in mind, who am I betting to win the Wanamaker Mile? It's close, very close, but after some thought, I'm going to just give the edge to Josh Kerr. Although he can be a little bit patchy in his races, most of the time Kerr rises to the occasion of the big events, and he has a strong history of fast times in the indoor circuit. And the last time these guys faced each other indoors, Kerr won emphatically, and he's only lost one race to Nuguse in the last 18 months, where he generally seemed to have a bit of an off race from the beginning. In a more tactical race, I would give the edge to Kerr, as whilst Nuguse is by no means a slouch in the last lap, I would bet Kerr to make a more aggressive and effective move come the last 2 laps or so. Whilst the paces will definitely help the leader try to front run to victory, Kerr's strength in the 2 mile and 3k indoor distances make me feel confident he'd be able to keep up with a fast race unless his race prep or something like illness gets in the way. There's another thing I'd like to mention about Kerr, and it's definitely a bit more of a speculative point, but I also get the impression from him that he is trying to position himself as the face of the short/middle distance category in Grand Slam track, and generally position himself as a face of the company as a whole. After all, he was one of their first big signings after Sydney McLaughlin-Levrone, and he also has a role as an athlete ambassador in the company, which allows him to voice his thoughts on what the athletes would want during the meets. He has also been leaning into GST's competitive marketing angle the most, by doing the most to hype up the races with some shit talking. Granted, this is also just Kerr's personality, but I think he is trying to lean into the villain role on purpose to make himself the most marketable athlete of the Grand Slam races, at least in the short to middle distance category. All this to say, I think he's going to want to be in excellent shape for those slams early on, whereas other athletes may be a little more split on whether they decide to peak for the slams or the World Championships. After listening to Kerr in interviews and just based off his personality in general, I think he's going to want to make a statement at Millrose. And whilst I'm sure Nuguse of course wants to win and make a statement for himself, I think he is less concerned about making an impact before the first GST slam than Kerr is. Now I want to make it clear that I think Nuguse still has a real shot of winning this. He is, after all, the 2-time champ and course record holder, so he is very familiar with the race. And the 200 meter track will make it harder for Kerr to make his move around the bend, especially for a big guy like himself, as he said. You can also argue that his indoor world champ victory was fueled by a home ground in Glasgow, whereas Nuguse is likely to have more American fans, given the race is of course in America. So whilst I would personally give the slight edge to Josh Kerr, I am by no means counting Nuguse out. I'd say it's maybe a 55-45 Kerr chance of victory. But I've been wrong many times before, and I would not be surprised if I'm wrong again. We should also not sleep on the other athletes in the meet, with Hobbs Kessler being a notable medal contender for this race. He was the runner-up in last year's Wanamaker mile after he faded off of Nuguse's pace but was able to rebound, outkicking George Mills in the final 50 metres. He is a 1:43.800 runner and sub 3:30 1500 metre runner, so he is not to be counted out. Given his 800 metre background, I'd expect him to go with the same tactics as last year, trying to run off Nuguse and potentially Josh Kerr and then outkick them in the final lap. It will be quite interesting to see how Kerr and Kessler react with one another, as if their plan is both to try and sit and kick off Nuguse, they will get in each other's way. But as he is shown in the 3k indoor champs last year, Kerr is not afraid to get rough and assert his position physically, so I don't see that being too much of an issue for Kerr. Now, there is a small voice inside me that is telling me that Kessler has a route to victory for this race. Given that most of the media attention is focused on Josh Kerr versus Yared Nuguse, Kessler can run under the radar a little bit and be somewhat of a dark horse in this race. And there's a possibility that Kerr and Nuguse focus on each other so much that they end up taking each other out, similar to how Jakob and Kerr focused on each other too much in the Olympic final. And this is of course what allowed Cole Hocker to pull that upset victory in the Paris Olympics. So maybe, just maybe, Kessler could have a shot of winning this through sneaking his way through Kerr and Nuguse whilst they try and take each other out. Ultimately, Kessler is definitely someone to keep an eye on in my opinion, but not quite yet at the level where I see him winning this race. But who knows, we could see another American upset the Brit again. Another person to watch is Cameron Myers, who is just coming off destroying the under 20 mile indoor world record in a race which he said he was disappointed with. And whilst he's not really at the level to be challenging for a top position, it does seem likely that we will see an under 20 world record be set again in this race. He thinks it's quite possible that Kerr and Nuguse will set off near world record pace, allowing him to sit behind and let them pull him to an under 20 mile record again. So definitely keep an eye out for that as well. Another interesting point more broadly to look out for is that Jakob Ingebrigtsen will be racing an indoor mile just 5 days after the Millrose Games, so we will likely get the continuation of a rivalry between Kerr and Jakob through both passive-aggressive shit-talking and some direct comparisons of their fitness at this stage of the year. It's very early in the season, so there won't be much to go off to be honest, but it will be interesting nonetheless. There is some speculation that Jakob will go for the indoor mile world record, which would be a nice indirect middle finger to Kerr, and I do wonder if the fact that Jakob is racing 5 days after Josh Kerr will encourage Kerr to drop as fast a performance as he can, as knowing him, he'll want to be able to send a statement to Jakob if he can. I don't think Ingebrigtsen will really care either way, as he generally prefers to let his racers do the talking and more often responds to Kerr's comments instead of making his own, but it is something to look out for nonetheless. Overall, I'm very excited for this race and look forward to what will happen on race day. Stay tuned for a 3000 meter breakdown coming in the next days as well. If you want to see a video on why track and field is almost completely unpredictable, then click on this video here. If you want to see my breakdown on the 3000 meters in the Millrose games, then click on this video here. Assuming it's been uploaded by the time you watch this video, it might not happen yet. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Who do you think will win the Wanamaker Mile? And I'll see you in the next one. Happy training.